Greetings, everyone from the North Shore, and thank you for soldiering on in your work tonight without me there to be a part of the conversation. As I met with the executive committee before leaving on this trip, it felt like since we've been doing everything virtually, that if I couldn't be there in person, that I might at least be able to share a video report so that you can see my face and hear my voice. And unfortunately, I just won't be able to join you in deliberating some of the important conversations you're having tonight. But trust that I've been in the background working with different teams, the task force, our executive committee, staff members, on many of the things you'll hear about tonight. So, and I look forward to hearing what you all come up with as decisions and guidance as we move forward. So I want to talk about a few things, and hopefully I'm not jumping out in front of anyone's report before we get to those things, but I'm just going to put them all in one video, and then hopefully you'll at least know my perspective and thoughts on various things and whatever information I might have in my back pocket that didn't get downloaded before I left. To J.N. Koshi's postulancy, as you know, those of you who've been on vestry before, we've done this a couple of times with different members of the parish who are seeking either ordination to the priesthood or the diaconate, that it's a canonical responsibility of a sponsoring parish, us, St. John's, to make sure that we agree that we're moving a person forward, so that the person is not doing it just of their own will, but with the backing of their faith community, the people who know them best. So that's us. Lynn will have the nomination form, and we've pre-signed it. Normally in non-COVID times, every vestry member would sign, but I believe that requirement is being waived, so just a vote will be necessary. And I'm delighted to see J.N. moving forward, and he does so with my full recommendation and support. As you know, he's been doing a lot of good work for us at St. John's, and I can just see that work blossoming and flourishing as his gifts for the priesthood are acknowledged and drawn forth from him. So there's that. Probably a few moments ago, you heard from the Reverend Margaret Thor that her intention has always been to be at St. John's for 5 years as our deacon, something that both she and I talked about when she came to St. John's as a faithful model, since deacons are really, their ministry doesn't belong to one individual parish, it belongs to the whole church. And that's why deacons' primary reporting structure is to a bishop and not to a rector. Margaret and I are colleagues in ministry, and so we collaborate on setting vision for how she can help St. John's, because I know that ministry best. But she really is a clergy person ordained for the whole church, and so we knew when she came to St. John's that at the end of 5 years we would discern how best to promote her going forth into the church to do something else. And so that time has come, and in fact, because of my sabbatical, Margaret was really kind and actually opted to stay for a 6th year, which was really helpful to the church, so there wasn't a lot of transition. Margaret, as she just told you, is headed off to St. John's in White Bear Lake, and boy, are they lucky to have her there. We've really benefited a lot from having her in our Faith in Action ministries, our youth ministry, just on the clericus, the clergy leadership at St. John's, and of course in worship. And as Margaret heads off, we will plan on celebrating her here at the end of August so that she can start at her new place right as the program year, whatever that looks like in COVID, begins in a new place. And of course, we share such strong connections through the Episcopal Church of Minnesota. Undoubtedly, Margaret will continue to find that her ministry and ours intersect and weave together, and she goes with all of our greatest gratitude. What's coming next for St. John's and the diaconate is still undecided. I've had good conversations, at least electronically, with our new bishop, Craig Loya, and you should know that he is open to some of our creative ideas about how to fill a deacon position at St. John's. We're not ready at this moment because a lot of things depend upon the discernment of all the individuals involved. But he also has at least one candidate that he thinks would be a good fit if we don't internally decide something, raising up ministry from within. He certainly has someone he would like for us to consider taking at St. John's. And so once those decisions have been made in the next probably month, I will be letting the vestry know. Again, because this is not a clear cut. The deacon is decided by a parish. It really does revolve around our relationship with the bishop. It will take some negotiating and some back and forth with him and his staff. And of course, the people who might come to us to be our deacon in the years ahead. I know we're going to be talking a lot tonight about the plans for reopening the church, the preparedness plans, and much gratitude to the task force member, many of whom are on this call tonight because they're vestry members and staff. There's a lot of good detail in both the preparedness plan, which is a requirement of any reopening. You really kind of have to have your safety, personnel, and building ducks in a row before you can reopen. And then also some of the work and deliberation, particularly the substantive conversations that the worship and programming folks, mostly worship, had. You'll see that there are probably some details that are unclear or that are still in discussion. And so tonight I just want you to know that the two things that guide my hope for our reopening are radical inclusivity and care of the vulnerable. I know I've said that before, but I just want to reemphasize that. Radical inclusivity means a lot of things, but at St. John's we say we welcome all people into this community of faith. And so I want that whatever we decide, whether it's on programs or worship, if it's an event or space that is meant to be open to all, that we are able to actually all meet. And if we can't, that we continue to meet in spaces like this where all can gather. So if a group is gathering that's just a demographic group and it's following the protocol set forth in the plan, I don't have many qualms about that, but a group like worship or an all-parish meeting that really should include all ages, abilities, and pre-existing conditions, let's make sure that either there's enough safety protocols built in to mitigate all risk, or let's do it in a risk-free environment like this right now. We just have so much we don't know yet about COVID-19, and I'd hate for the church to be responsible for putting vulnerable people at risk and being exclusive by gathering where others feel they safely cannot gather. I know that you all will come to faithful decisions tonight, and I'm excited to hear how we can communicate to the church. Know that when we do, I'm sure part of the deliberation will be communication strategy. I'm happy to take whatever bullet points and plan material comes together and work with the wardens to come up with some sort of explanatory video or letter or both, and subsequent follow-up communication, so that it's not just a plan, but that people hear from us why we made the decisions and how they're going to be implemented, and then give people time to read and absorb the plan itself. We're also going to be talking tonight about some different staffing holes and spaces that are open. As you know, we've got space open still in the communications area right now. Jay and Koshi has been filling in where Ellie Watkins left off, and he's been doing that faithfully, but his time comes to an end officially in August. Depending on when we have a transition ready, he'll be ready to go because he starts seminary in September. He also has been filling in for the ministries that Leanne Schmidt was not able to continue as she departed to go back to work full-time at the schools. And so those two positions remain somewhat in flux. It sounds like from Jan's seminary that we can in fact keep him on in a ministry capacity. So the Invite, Welcome, Connect stuff as a work-study program would in fact continue to work. And so as long as Betty and the IWC team is comfortable continuing work with Jan, I know he is comfortable continuing to do that work on our behalf as a seminarian. And so we've got that position really covered, I think. Communication, we're hopeful that we can find someone to fill that spot. And right now, we also have a third position that is coming open, and that is, you know, that Katie Madsen is pregnant and expecting will be taking a maternity leave. And in the past, we've had a part-time CYF assistant, someone who could kind of help out or be there as a substitute when our lead person was away. We didn't fill that position last year, and would like to take advantage of an opportunity coming towards us with Circle of the Beloved. Circle of the Beloved, as you know, is a program that Craig Lemming helped pilot and was the director of for its pilot years. Um, and I was actually on the board. We on Vestry even deliberated ways to see if we could bring Circle to St. Paul, and I know that they're still eager to have those conversations down the road. But one of their interns is in need of a placement this year, and they're looking at faith communities. And St. John's was approached. And the intern that they have in mind actually has deep, rich roots in the CYF programs of Minnesota. And so Katie Madsen and Craig Lemming in our faith formation have met with her, and there's a low cost of essentially dues to Circle of the Beloved, and then we get in return an intern. And so it's not an employer-employee relationship as such, though we should set up documents to sort of guide and direct both the employees and our relationship with them. But it is about the cost of just under $10,000 for the full program year, which is incredibly affordable. So Katie and Craig have already met and have found enough work for that individual to do, but it will only be for part of their time. And so what we need to discern is how to use the other part of their time for that very affordable price, whether it's in the communications or somewhere else. But it still remains that we're going to need to do some searching for our replacement for the 20 hours that Jan was and was covering a piece of. He wasn't covering all of. But we still have a giant hole to fill there. And so we'll be working with personnel, with Sarah, who would oversee that position, and hopefully we'll have a response to the vestry by August about how that's being filled. But trust that that's an internal issue, and we will get it covered inside the costs that we have set aside for it this year. And then lastly, you may have already caught wind on our social media or on social media that our good friends at Crocus Hill Preschool have decided in the age of COVID that it's just not sustainable or tenable for them to continue as an institution. I know that Kathy had been discerning for quite some time, as she says, at the age of 72, how to sort of retire and pass the business on to someone else, as it was to her when she received it 21 years ago. But no candidate was forthcoming. No, was sort of obvious. There was no heir apparent to pass on the baton to. Kathy said more than 2/3 of the teachers at the school fall in the age category of vulnerable adult, and so going back to school in the fall felt unsafe for most of her employees, and without the prospect of someone who could take it over and just hold on to the license until it was safe to open, they decided to call it quits after 60, I think it's 61 years in the neighborhood in Crocus Hill, providing solid formation and education for the youngest children in our communities. The Crocus Hill is going to be no more. So we want to celebrate and thank them for their partnership in these past, 7 years at St. John's, and give thanks for the work they've done over the long haul. They'll obviously be doing their own celebrations, but I know St. John's has occupied this last chapter in their life as a landlord. And as I said to Kathy, I have never known of a landlord-tenant relationship that's been 100% smooth sailing and easygoing. But despite any bumps in our road, it really has been a pleasure and a joy to have them around, and they've been a true benefit to our program, providing education for some of our own staff children and parishioners, and just being a delight to have them in the building. The noise and the life that they've brought has been all to the good. It does mean that come September, we've got an open wing of the building again. And I know, before you jump to it, that we don't have time tonight to do a long discussion about the missional capacity of that space, like how it could benefit us as either an income line again or as a complement to our existing programs. I should also say that while no door is ever permanently closed, I know that the CYF program has really found positive and hopeful new life in terms of our building use by moving into that new CYF center in the Undercroft. It puts the kids and the classrooms closer to parents. It puts them in a higher quality, better space, and it just suits our needs at the moment. So please, as you begin to think and imagine, know that those spaces will need new life, and we will need new income at some point, but we will also need to make some cost cuts in the year to come. All of those things can be debated in our August meeting, but I wanted you to know them right now as a heads up. And then finally, racial justice initiatives. Uh, Lynn, Mark, and myself have met now, both over email and then in Zoom format, to discuss what was brought up at the last meeting, which could be uh, sort of framed loosely as how can we make known our own position of racial inclusivity and racial justice on Summit Avenue. And when we met last time, I said I wanted to be able to do that with integrity. So first and foremost, to me, is St. John's even just beginning to do the work on racial reconciliation and anti-racism. And so we've begun those courses that you've probably heard about. We want to repeat those or do something similar on a recurring basis, both for staff and for parishioners. We've been posting racial justice and anti-racism resources daily on our Facebook page so that people can access those if they're on social media. And we've compiled a very large bucket of material for JN to post, both for children, youth, and family, and adults. And when we've exhausted that bucket, I'm sure there's still buckets more to go. We will hopefully compile that and just share the whole document on our website, so people that want to just find the whole thing. Of course, most of it was found by doing what you've been doing, which is Googling anti-racism, and so know the resources are popular, well known, and out there. But we're sharing them and asking and inviting our parishioners to join. And then the idea of communicating a sort of prophetic or pastoral message via our communications, especially on Summit Avenue where people walk and drive, is an intriguing idea. And so we've mocked up a couple ideas that you all should discuss, just as we did when we posted a banner about our position on the marriage amendment that was being proposed back in 2012. This would be another example of sort of the church taking a position on a social issue of the day that comports with our faith background, our sort of our theology. So you'll see two mock-ups. Of course, they and I are open to your suggestions. And then another avenue that we discussed at the last meeting, and that has only just started to take shape, is that there's a possibility that we could examine our history, because we have a wonderful history book and lots of resources at our disposal. So please know that Gabrielle Lawrence jumped at the idea of being a part of that, and I'm hoping that she and I can come up with a plan that will include parishioners, our history book, maybe a facilitator, and even the Minnesota Historical Society, the archives of the Episcopal Church, and allow us to kind of go back and see, how does St. John's as an institution connect to ideas of whiteness and even white supremacy? How have we connected to racial justice and activism? And what is the full history of St. John's, the benefits we've gained from the structures of oppression, and also how have we worked, even if it was in small increments, to the dismantling of those structures, and then have a fuller account of who we are as an institution when it comes to race, and maybe a better understanding of how we can be more active at the healing of the hurts in the world and where we've been a part of them. There's so much more to say. I don't want to take up any more time, but I look forward to hearing how your conversations go tonight. Blessings, and I'll see you all in August.